Hey, if you haven't been following crypto news at the end of December and beginning of January, you missed a pretty interesting recovery. Render Network, also known as RNDR or Render, just showed some serious growth after months of stability. At the beginning of January 2026, the price of Render was trading around 216. That doesn't sound super impressive at first glance, but if you look at where the price was a month ago, you'll see a 74% recovery. Over 1 week, that's plus 11%. Over 1 month, that's plus 40%. This is happening at a time when the entire crypto industry is looking at artificial intelligence, and Render Network is in the perfect position to take advantage of this. Let's break down what this project actually is and why people are paying attention to it. What is Render Network really? Render Network is a decentralized platform that lets people rent out their video cards. Yes, you heard that right. Video cards. Picture this. You have a computer with a powerful graphics card. You don't use it much most of the time. Maybe you use it for gaming. But for the rest of the time, it's just sitting in your computer doing nothing. Render Network lets you rent out that graphics card to people who need computing power. They pay you in Render tokens. You get income. They get cheap computing power for their work. This solves a real problem. Cloud computing is expensive. AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, all of it costs big money. And when you need special power for artificial intelligence or 3D rendering, it becomes really expensive. Render Network offers an alternative, cheaper, more decentralized, more fair. The Render token, or RNDR as it used to be called, is necessary to pay the people who provide the graphics cards. It's the fuel of the ecosystem. History and evolution of the project. Render Network was founded in 2017. It was one of the first projects that tried to solve the problem of decentralized computing. At first, the project ran on the Ethereum blockchain. The token was called RNDR. But in 2023-2024, something important happened. The project migrated to the Solana blockchain and renamed the token to Render. Why did this happen? Because Solana is much faster and cheaper than Ethereum. For a network that needs lots of transactions, this made sense. Fees got lower, speed got higher. All exchanges automatically updated their users from RNDR to Render. Binance, Kraken, OKX, everyone did it. It was smooth, no problems. This migration was actually really important. It made the network much more practical to use. Where the price has been and where it's going. The price history of Render is really interesting because it shows the volatility of the crypto market. In March 2024, Render was at an all-time high. The price was around $13.50 to $14. This was when everyone was talking about AI. When people thought any project connected to AI would go up. But then a correction happened. The market cooled down. People started realizing that not every AI project would be successful. Through all of 2025, the price kept falling. It dropped from $13 to $130 by the end of December. That's a 90% drop. People who bought at the peak lost huge amounts of money. If someone spent $10,000 at the top, by the end of December, that would have been only $1,000. That's painful. But then something interesting happened. At the end of December and beginning of January, the price suddenly jumped. In 1 week, there was a 74% recovery, from $130 to $2.27. This recovery continued into early January. As of January 5th, the price was around $2.16. On January 6th, it was already $2.27. Why did the price go up? Nobody knows for sure. In the crypto world, that's not uncommon. You don't always know exactly why the price suddenly goes up, but there are some theories. The first theory is the return of interest in AI projects. At the beginning of 2026, when the whole market started rising, people started looking at projects connected to AI. Render Network is one of the few projects that has real use cases for AI. The second theory is that the price was super low. When something falls 90%, people often think that's a buying opportunity. Maybe the bottom was already made. Maybe now is a good time to buy. The third theory is a partnership with Nvidia. In 2025, Render Network announced a partnership with Nvidia. This was symbolic. Nvidia is the biggest company in the world that makes graphics cards for AI. If Nvidia is working with Render Network, it signals that the project is legitimate. The fourth reason is that the network is actually growing. People are actually using Render Network to do 3D rendering, AI computations, and other things. This is not just speculation. There's real usage. The fifth reason could just be speculative recovery. On the wave of the overall market going up, people buy different tokens. Render was way down. A 74% recovery in 1 week gets attention. Technical indicators and what they mean. Let's look at the technical indicators for Render. RSI, or Relative Strength Index, shows that the token was in an overbought state after the recovery. RSI was at around 74, which means bulls took control and the price could pull back a bit. Support is around the $1.26 to $1.55 level. These are levels where people actively buy and the price bounces. Resistance is at $1.87 to $1.95. These are levels where people actively sell. Trading volume increased a lot during the recovery. This means it wasn't just garbage money, it was real buyer interest. Moving averages, the 7-day and 14-day, just started going up after a long decline. This is possibly a sign of a trend reversal. But it's important to understand that all these indicators don't guarantee the future. They just show what happened in the past. What analysts are saying. Different analysts give different predictions for Render. Femex says Render could hit $1.74 in the short term and higher long term. Changelly is much more optimistic. They say Render could reach $19 in 2026. That's more than a 750% increase from current levels. CoinCodex predicts that Render could hit $3 within the next month. That's about a 32% gain from the current price. Gate.io says Render will trade between $2.14 and $2.39 in 2026. That's pretty modest growth. CoinStats says Render could hit $15 soon if the trend continues. See how all these predictions are very different? One says $1.74, another says $19, a third says $3. This is because the future is unpredictable. Long-term predictions. If we look further ahead to 2027 to 2030, analysts also give different predictions. For 2027, Changelly predicts $17. Gate says $2.34. CoinStats says $2.70. For 2030, Changelly says $137. Gate says $3.98. CoinStats says $25. For 2031, Gate predicts a 72% gain to $3.98. See the pattern? Changelly is very optimistic. Gate is very conservative. CoinStats is somewhere in the middle. Which of these predictions are correct? Nobody knows. Predicting crypto prices is not an exact science. What makes Render valuable? Render is valuable not just because people hope the price goes up. It's valuable because it has real use cases. The first use case is payments. When someone needs computing power for video rendering or 3D graphics or AI computations, they pay in render tokens to the people who provide the computing. The second use case is incentives. People who provide graphics cards get rewarded in render. This motivates them to provide quality service. The third use case is governance. Render holders can vote on the development of the network. They can influence what happens next. The fourth use case is security. Render is used in escrow to make sure work gets done fairly. If the network grows, if more and more people use render for computing, then demand for render grows. And if demand grows and supply is relatively limited, then the price should go up. But this assumes the network will actually grow. If the network stays small and nobody uses it, the price could fall. Why render matters for AI. Here's the key to the render network story. AI requires a huge amount of computing power. When you train a large AI model, it requires thousands of graphics cards working together. Cloud providers like AWS and Google Cloud provide this power, but they're expensive, really expensive. Render Network offers an alternative. If you have a graphics card in your home, you can rent it to people who need AI computing power. It's cheaper than the cloud. It's better for you. In a world where AI is becoming increasingly important, platforms like this become increasingly valuable. Risks you need to know about. But there are risks. The first risk is volatility. Render already fell 90%. It could fall 90% again. Crypto is volatile. The second risk is competition. Big companies like Google and Amazon could lower their cloud computing prices. If they do, render becomes less competitive. The third risk is technology. There could be better ways to do distributed computing. Render could become obsolete. The fourth risk is adoption. If the render network doesn't grow and people don't use it, the token loses value. The fifth risk is regulation. Governments could introduce new rules that hurt crypto projects. Should you buy render? That's a personal decision. But here's what you need to think about. If you believe that AI computing will become increasingly important, if you believe that people will want cheap cloud computing, if you believe that render network will grow, then render could be an interesting investment. But remember that this is a high-risk investment. You could lose all your money. Only invest what you can afford to lose. Do your own research. Look at the technology. Look at the team. Look at the development of the network. Don't invest just because everyone is talking about it. The Nvidia partnership. One of the biggest recent events is the partnership with Nvidia. Nvidia is the biggest company that makes graphics cards for AI. If Nvidia is working with Render Network, it means they think the project makes sense. This partnership improved the network's capabilities. People can now use Nvidia GPUs through Render Network. For Render, this was a massive boost. It showed people that the project is not just speculation, it's a real partnership with a real company. Comparison with other projects. How does Render compare to other AI and infrastructure projects? Unlike many AI projects that don't really do anything, Render Network has real use cases. People actually use the network. Unlike centralized cloud providers, Render is decentralized. This means nobody can control prices or prevent you from doing something. Unlike other decentralized computing networks, Render focuses on GPU computing. That's exactly what you need for AI. Migration to Solana. Something important happened when Render Network migrated to Solana. On Ethereum, transactions were slow and expensive. Fees were high. This didn't work for a distributed computing network that needs lots of transactions. Solana, on the other hand, is fast and cheap. Transactions happen in seconds. Fees are minimal. This migration made the network much better. It made it more practical. It let more people use the network without paying huge fees. Final thoughts. Render Network is an interesting project. It has real use cases. It has partnerships with big companies like Nvidia. The price fell 90% from its peak, but recently started recovering. This could be the beginning of a new trend or just speculation. Analysts give different predictions, from $1.74 to $137. That's because the future is unpredictable. If you invest in Render, only invest what you can afford to lose. Do your own research. Don't just listen to the hype. Long-term, if AI computing becomes important, and if Render Network becomes an important platform for it, then Render could grow significantly. But remember that this might not happen. The market is unpredictable. Thanks for watching.